You're listening to Bay Area Realty Experts, the podcast where we break down the biggest stories shaping our local market. In today's episode, we dive into the Compass versus Zillow lawsuit and what it means for private listings, Bay Area homebuyers, and real estate agents like you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex topics and really try to pull out the key insights for you. Today, we're diving into, well, it's a pretty fascinating high-stakes battle shaking up the online real estate world. We're talking about the recent lawsuit filed by the real estate brokerage giant Compass against the, home search powerhouse Zillow.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a legal spat. It feels like a fundamental clash over who really controls the flow of information in real estate today. Our mission today is to pull apart the claims, the counterclaims, the strategies underneath it all, just to help you understand what's really at stake here. How homes are bought and sold online.
And we've gathered some really good sources, everything from CNN Business to Housing Wire, to try and give us the full picture of this unfolding legal drama. So whether you follow the real estate market closely or maybe you're just curious about how these huge platforms actually work, this deep dive should get you up to speed. Okay, let's get right into it then. Compass, right? One of the biggest brokerages in the country. They officially brought this, well, it sounds like a long, simmering dispute, into the courtroom. That was Monday, June 23rd, 2025. What's the core accusation?
At its heart, Compass is accusing Zillow of trying to, crush the competition. That's the gist. Their main claim is that Zillow is engaging in an anti-competitive conspiracy. And they're doing it, Compass says, by using a new, very restrictive rule to basically maintain its dominance over digital home listings.
Okay, and this rule, Compass is even given it a name, right? The Zillow ban. That sounds dramatic. That's really the crux of it.
That's exactly it. It's quite specific, too. Zillow's new policy, it mandates that any home listing that's publicly marketed to consumers anywhere.
Anywhere online or?
Anywhere publicly. It must also be published on Zillow within 24 hours.
24 hours, okay.
Yeah. And if it's not, Zillow just won't allow that listing on its platform at all. This policy, it actually took effect back on May 28th, and they started enforcing it on June 30th.
Wow. Okay, so market it publicly anywhere, and boom, it has to hit Zillow almost immediately, or you're essentially blacklisted from their platform for that listing. And Compass clearly sees this as a deliberate move. They're saying it makes it nearly impossible, their words, for sellers to operate outside Zillow, forcing everything onto Zillow's platform, so presumably Zillow profits from selling the leads generated from those listings.
That's precisely Compass's argument. They see it as a way for Zillow to consolidate control and monetize all that listing traffic.
Okay, so that's the Compass perspective. Makes sense from their side. But Zillow, naturally, they see things very differently. What's their defense? How are they pushing back?
Oh yeah, Zillow has strongly disputed Compass's whole characterization of the lawsuit. They flat out stated it's unfounded. Their argument is that the new rule was enacted really in the spirit of fairness and, this is their key word, consumer transparency.
Right, transparency. I've seen them mention that a lot. They've been pretty vocal about that reasoning, haven't they?
They really have. A Zillow spokesperson actually stated, and let me quote this directly, "At the heart of this issue is a simple principle. When a listing is publicly marketed, it should be accessible to all buyers across all platforms, including Zillow."
Mm-hmm.
They go on to argue that hiding listings creates a fragmented market, limits consumer choice, and creates barriers to homeownership, which they believe is bad for, everyone. Buyers, sellers, the industry.
Okay, so from Zillow's point of view, this isn't about grabbing market share. It's about making sure you, the person looking for a home, you see everything that's publicly out there immediately. No hidden pockets.
That's their public stance, yes.
Yeah.
Level playing field for buyers.
Now, here's where it gets maybe a little more complicated, because Compass isn't just suing Zillow out of the blue, right? This whole lawsuit kind of shines a light back onto Compass's own business practices, their specific marketing strategy, which has itself drawn some criticism. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. This is key context. Compass uses what they call a three-phased marketing strategy for home sellers. And this system is, it's pretty central to this whole fight. So phase one, that's the private listing. It starts as an office exclusive.
Meaning just within Compass.
Primarily, yeah.
Yeah.
Marketed internally to Compass agents or sometimes privately to agents at other specific firms. The main idea, they say, is to sort of test the home's sales price without broadcasting it everywhere.
Okay, keep it quiet initially. What's phase two?
Phase 2 is the coming soon status. So if it doesn't sell privately, the listing moves to coming soon. Gets showcased on Compass's own website, trying to generate some buzz, some buyer interest before it officially hits the broader market.
And how long can it stay coming soon? Is that standardized?
That actually varies. It's worth noting, the multiple listing services, the MLSs, they have different rules on how long a listing can stay in that limbo stage.
Right, the MLS. Just for mine listeners, that's like the central database where agents share listings with each other, the backbone of traditional real estate data sharing.
Exactly right. It's how properties get wide exposure among licensed agents and their clients. Okay, so after coming soon, we get to phase 3. That's go live on all platforms. Finally, if the home still hasn't sold through those first 2 phases, it gets listed as active on the MLS. And that means it becomes publicly available everywhere for agents, for shoppers, across all the big home search engines, including Zillow.
Okay, so it can eventually end up on Zillow, but only after potentially going through these earlier, more restricted phases. How common is this strategy for Compass? Is this a niche thing or?
No, it's pretty significant. As of mid-February this year, about 35%, over a third of all Compass listings were either that Compass Private Exclusive or Compass Coming Soon phase.
Wow, that's a big chunk.
It is. Though, interestingly, their own data from 2024 shows that 94% of listings that started as private exclusives did eventually end up on the MLS anyway.
Okay, so most make it public eventually. But why do sellers choose this route, according to Compass? What's the upside for them in holding back initially?
Well, Compass claims many sellers choose this specifically because of how homes are displayed on Zillow. They perceive some features as, quote, negative insights.
Negative insights? Like what?
They point to things like the Zestimate, Zillow's automated property value estimate, and also the climate risks section, showing potential hazards like wildfires or floods.
Ah, the Zestimate, yes.
Yes.
That algorithm. It can be a real sore spot for sellers and agents, can it? It's not a formal appraisal. It can fluctuate, sometimes wildly inaccurate depending on the market. For a seller trying to carefully position their home and its price, having this automated guess stamped on the listing right away, I can see how they might see that as undermining their efforts. It takes away some of that, marketing control.
That's exactly the feeling. Compass CEO Robert Refkin framed it very directly, saying, this lawsuit is about protecting consumer choice. The implication being that sellers should have the choice, the flexibility, to manage how their property is first presented, maybe without those immediate algorithmic overlays.
Okay, so if it's about consumer choice for the seller, why is there pushback from others in the industry against this private listing strategy? What are the criticisms?
The main criticism revolves around fairness and potential conflicts of interest. Critics argue that Compass's strategy could unfairly pressure sellers into making deals with buyers who are also represented by Compass agents.
Ah, the double-ending scenario.
Exactly, where one brokerage collects the commission from both the buyer side and the seller side of the deal.
And while that's great for the brokerage's bottom line, the concern is whether the seller is truly getting the best possible offer from the entire market or just the best offer from within the Compass network, right?
Right.
Does it prioritize the firm over the client?
That's precisely the debate. Does it really serve the seller's single best interest, or could it incentivize keeping deals in-house? Critics also argue it undermines the progress that's been made towards market transparency for everyone, for all consumers.
It's also interesting you mentioned Zillow frames their rule around transparency. This rule, the Zillow ban, it actually sounds somewhat similar in spirit to an existing industry policy, doesn't it? It's not totally out of left field.
That's a really good point. You're spot on. Zillow's policy does kind of piggyback on a rule from 2019 called Clear Cooperation that was established by the National Association of Realtors, NAR. And that policy basically says if an agent markets a property publicly at all, they have to submit that listing to their local MLS within 1 business day.
1 business day, okay.
So Zillow is essentially saying, look, NAR already established this principle of quick public disclosure via the MLS. Our rule just enforces that same principle on our platform.
Gotcha. Makes sense why they'd connect it to that. Now, what about the conspiracy part? Compass isn't just pointing fingers at Zillow alone, are they?
No, they're broadening the accusation. Compass has accused Zillow of conspiring with other major players. They specifically mentioned Redfin, another big home search competitor, and also the brokerage EXP Realty.
Why them?
Because Redfin and EXP Realty apparently agreed to adopt Zillow's new 24-hour rule for their own platforms or operations as well. Compass sees this coordination as evidence of a conspiracy to maintain market dominance together.
Okay, but crucially, Redfin and EXP aren't actually named as defendants in the lawsuit, right? And I saw EXP Realty push back pretty strongly against the implication.
Oh, very strongly. EXP Realty put out a statement saying, any implication of co-conspiracy is categorically false. They stress their business strategies are independent, and their CEO, Leo Parecia, was, let's say, quite blunt. He said, it's ironic that Compass, a company that's never turned a profit, is choosing to burn cash and credibility on a lawsuit, and suing Zillow for giving consumers access. That's not strategy, that's desperation.
Oof, strong words. No love lost there, clearly.
Clearly not.
We also noticed, just looking through reactions online, some really strong opinions in the comment sections of the news articles. It really shows how divided people are on this. Like one commenter, Christy Berry, was firmly defending a seller's right to choose a private listing strategy, and she questioned Zillow using photos that agents paid for, essentially for Zillow's own profit via leads.
Raising the issue of who owns and benefits from listing data.
Exactly. But then another commenter, Susan Crancer, totally agreed with Zillow. She basically said, you can't advertise something publicly, but also claim it's private. Her words were, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, that really captures the core tension, doesn't it?
It does. So thinking about you listening, someone trying to buy or sell a home, what does this all really mean? It highlights this fundamental push and pull, doesn't it? Between like market efficiency, getting all the info out fast, versus an individual seller wanting control over how their biggest asset is presented.
Absolutely. It's a battle over information control, ultimately.
Okay, so shifting back to the legal fight itself. This isn't just posturing, it's happening in court. Zillow's already responded to Compass's initial moves, specifically their claim of irreparable harm.
That's right. Zillow quickly filed letters opposing Compass's request for a preliminary injunction.
Okay, remind us, preliminary injunction. That's Compass asking the judge to immediately pause Zillow's rule now before the full case is decided, because they claim they're being harmed right now.
Precisely. They also asked for expedited discovery, which means getting evidence really fast to support that urgent request. They're trying to stop the alleged damage while the lawsuit proceeds.
But Zillow's opposing that.
Vigorously. Zillow's main argument on this point is timing. They point out that Compass waited nearly 3 months after the policy actually took effect before filing the lawsuit.
Oh.
So Zillow is saying if the harm was so immediate and irreparable, why wait 3 months? They argue this delay completely undermines any claim of urgency.
So Zillow's basically saying, look, if there's any injury, it's not an emergency that requires stopping our rule right now. And maybe, they'd argue, it's the kind of harm that could just be compensated with money later if Compass eventually wins.
Exactly. That's the legal standard they're aiming at. Beyond the urgency issue, Zillow is also attacking the fundamental basis of the lawsuit itself. They argue Compass hasn't even properly shown or plausibly alleged, in legal terms, several key things. Antitrust standing, basically. The right to even bring this kind of case a correctly defined relevant market where competition is supposedly being harmed. Or that Zillow actually has market power in that specific market.
Wow, so they're really going after the foundations of Compass's whole antitrust claim.
They are. From Zillow's perspective, they frame it almost simply. Compass is just complaining that Zillow doesn't want to display listings under certain conditions Zillow itself sets for its own platform. Zillow calls this an inactionable theory, basically saying we can choose what we carry.
It sounds like Zillow sees this lawsuit not just as wrong, but actually bad for the market overall, like counterproductive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Zillow explicitly argues that what Compass is trying to do here is reverse the technological transformation, that Zillow and others pioneered the very transformation that made home listings widely and freely available online to anyone.
So they're painting Compass as trying to turn back the clock to a less transparent era.
That's the narrative. They suggest a win for Compass wouldn't promote competition, it would actually impair it. It would lead to, in their view, new barriers for buyers, and just a more frustrating, less open experience for people trying to find homes.
So what's the timeline looking like for the next steps in court?
Well, Zillow is scheduled to file its formal opposition to that preliminary injunction request by July 18th.
Okay.
Then Compass gets to reply by August 1st, assuming their request for that fast-track discovery doesn't get granted first. Separately, Zillow also plans to file a big motion to dismiss the entire lawsuit by August 22nd.
So trying to get it thrown out completely.
Yes. And Compass, for their part, they've already signaled that if the judge does dismiss some or all of their claims, they plan to just file an amended, tweaked complaint.
Okay, so nobody's backing down. It sounds like both sides are really dug in for what could be a long and probably very expensive legal battle.
Definitely looks that way.
Wow, what a tangled web indeed.
Mm.
So, wrapping our heads around this deep dive, this Compass versus Zillow fight, it really throws into sharp relief these fundamental disagreements, doesn't it? About transparency, about market control, about what consumer choice even means in online real estate. You've got Zillow on one side, championing this idea of open, immediate access for all buyers, framing their rule as being purely pro-consumer, anti-fragmentation.
Right. And then on the other side, you have Compass arguing for more of a broker-guided approach, emphasizing the seller's flexibility, their need for protection from things like, maybe inaccurate estimates right off the bat. They see Zillow's rule not as transparency, but as a coercive power play.
It really does boil down to two very different visions for how real estate listings should work in the future, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. If Compass were to succeed, you could genuinely see a shift in how and where listings get shared online. Maybe a less centralized system, potentially more opaque initially, where brokers hold more cards in that early phase.
Mm-hmm.
But if Zillow prevails, well, their market dominance and their push for full, immediate public disclosure would only get stronger. It would really cement that expectation from consumers. I should see everything right now.
So ultimately, what should you, listening to this, take away? I think this whole situation forces us to think about how transparency isn't always simple. It's not universally agreed upon. What one company calls transparency, another calls control. It really makes you consider, where do you think the line should be drawn? Between a seller's right to market their home strategically, maybe privately at first, and a buyer's right to have easy, open access to all available information.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. Definitely something to mull over as this legal drama continues to unfold.